Hey everyone, it is time for another Siege School episode. I know it's been a while, and this is one that's been a long time coming. 2 episodes ago, I did the Attacker Secondary Gadgets Siege School video, where I went over gadgets like Claymore, breaching charges, etc. And then in the video, I said I would do the Defender Secondary Gadgets in the future, and now it is that time. I've been holding off on doing it for a while now because I knew that Deployable Shields were getting reworked, and I didn't want to get ahead of myself and say stuff that would be obsolete or completely invalid by the time they came out. So with that all said, let's get into the actual gadgets. There's 5 gadgets that we're going to talk about today, and these are impact grenades, Nitro Cells, bulletproof cameras, barbed wire, and the new Deployable Shield. And we will go through those gadgets in the order I just listed them. If you want timestamps for each of them, there should be a list down below in the description. And just like the Attacker Secondary Gadget video, we're going to cover each gadget in depth. For the new players, we're going to discuss the basics like who has the gadget, how does it work, how many do you get, etc. And then for the more advanced players, we'll get into the more nuanced aspects of the gadget and also strategies and advanced tactics that you can use with these gadgets. And then of course there will be a quiz at the end with a question for each gadget. Now let's get into the first category. Like I said, the first one we're going to talk about is impact grenades. Impact grenades are a throwable gadget for defenders, of which they each get 2. They can be used to destroy the environment, destroy gadgets, and hurt attackers, or if you're in casual, other defenders. The main 2 uses of this gadget are for creating rotate holes on site as well as impact tricking. Now these impact grenades cannot be destroyed by any conventional means. Instead, they either detonate when coming in contact with another object or after a certain distance has been reached. What this means is that you cannot use them for long-range assaults, as they'll detonate in the air while traveling to the target. And then on top of that, as far as damage goes, the impact grenades really do not do a whole lot of damage. The damage drop-off for impact grenades is only 2.5 meters away, which means if you throw an impact grenade and it detonates and the operator is more than 2.5 meters away, they will take 0 damage. And even if it does hit the target square on, for a 3 armor operator it only does 45 damage. For a 2 armor operator it does 51 damage. And then for a 1 armor operator it does 60. So in no situation will it ever be a 1-hit kill, unless the attacker is already hurt. Because of this, you really should not be using them as a primary way to kill people. They are not a killing gadget. You'll have to hit very close to target in order to inflict actual damage, and you'll also be incredibly vulnerable while pulling them out. So really only use impact grenades if you're looking to meme. But those are the basics for impact grenades. Now, these are all the operators that are able to bring impact grenades, as of the release of this video. But as of Emberize, these are the current operators. Castle, Rook, Capcan, Caveira, Legion, Vigil, Maestro, Alibi, Clash, Cade, and Goyo. Now I personally bring impact grenades on Castle, Rook, Cav, Legion, Vigil, and Alibi. Now the reason why I bring impacts on these operators is either because they're roamers or anchors. Castle, Rook, and Legion are generally sitting on site, and we will need rotate holes on almost any site in this entire game. So all 3 of those can bring impacts and open up holes on site. Meanwhile, Cav, Vigil, and Alibi are all roamers, and if you ever need to get away from a fight, impact grenades are the perfect way to do that. So that is personally why I bring impact grenades on those 6 operators. But with that covered, let's move on to the more advanced section where we'll talk about tactics and strategies that high-ranked players will often use. Like I said before, their number 1 use overall is rotation holes. This is where you use impact grenades on a wall, generally either on site or close to site, with the sole purpose that it'll allow defenders to move fluidly between rooms. This way attackers can't just watch one single doorway where you can go through, you have multiple options. So basically creating a second door. However, creating rotate holes is also a very popular thing to do when you have a shotgun or a secondary shotgun on defense. Meaning some teams will opt to bring an operator that has a shotgun as well as a good secondary instead of bringing impact grenades. That way the team can bring more barbed wire, nitro cells, or whatever they need. However, for the most part in ranked, you will definitely see more people bringing impacts instead of shotguns to make rotate holes. But in those cases where shotguns are used on rotation holes, impacts will generally be saved for either impact tricking or roaming rotations. And of these 2 topics, first we'll talk about impact tricking. Impact tricking is something that I'm not generally a fan of, and I try to go out of my way to avoid doing it unless it's something that's actually counterable. One of the most popular impact tricking spots that I'll do is the CEO office on Bank. The west side facing walls facing the square staircase have little holes above them. When you reinforce them, you can shoot open these panels and you can throw impacts over the wall. What this means is that if attackers are pushing the square staircase and they try to breach the wall, you can throw an impact over, and then when the impact grenade explodes, it will destroy whatever hard breaching utility is on the other side of the wall. Now keep in mind, you do have to throw the impact very close to the wall, so you want to throw it almost straight up as opposed to straight across. The closer it gets to the wall, the farther down it will reach. And when you get it as close as possible, the explosion in the ceiling will generally reach about 75% of the way down the wall. This will destroy any thermite charge at all placed in the wall, as thermite charges cannot be placed low enough to avoid this. And it will also destroy almost any Hibana pellets placed above the line shown. What this means is that if Hibana puts pellets below the line, they will not be destroyed, and you can use this to counter impact tricking. Now the reason why I'm not a big fan of this strategy is because for the most part, it is a very safe strat for the defenders to do, and it very much fucks over the attackers. I'm not a huge fan of strategies where the defenders are not in a place where they can be vulnerable to get an advantage. It's 100% reward with 0% risk. Now because of this, I only ever do impact tricking on sites where it'd be very easy to counter me. The only one that I really do it on, like I said, is CEO Office of Bank. In order to impact trick, you do have to stand basically right next to the wall, and because of this, if any attacker were to repel on the north side windows, they could very easily kill you. This is very different compared to other sites like Basement on Clubhouse, where to impact trick, you basically open up the floor underneath one of the little trolleys, and you just throw impacts up there whenever any pellets or thermite charges are placed on the hatch. It is absolutely impossible to counter this as an attacker unless the defender is just standing right underneath the holes. But if you're a smart defender, you can easily impact trick it without ever risking your life, and it makes the hatch impossible to get. But that's basically it for impact tricking. And now that I've rambled on about that enough, we'll talk quickly about roaming impacts. Some players who decide to roam will save their impacts in order to navigate the map more efficiently, or even to escape potential death. If you're starting to get pincered, pushed, or hunted, you can impact into another room or through a hatch to get away and waste more time. Or you can use these impacts more aggressively. You can use it on a wall to trick someone to look over there and then you run in through a doorway. Or you can use it on, say, a garage wall to run out and try to push someone who's repelling or not paying attention. And there's not much more to it other than that. But that's about it for impacts. Like I said, in majority of situations, you're going to use them for rotations or to be a little bit aggressive, but there are some other uses for them. But now that we've covered the core information of impacts, we're going to move on to the next category, which is Nitro Cells. Nitro Cells are the other explosive secondary gadget on defense. Every defender who can bring one only has one. They're not like impact grenades where you can throw them super far and do very little damage. They're actually quite the opposite. You can't throw them very far, but they do a lot more damage. Within close proximity, which is around 2 meters, it'll kill almost every single operator except for shield operators who are looking directly at it, since they have explosive resistance. Then once you get past 2 meters, the damage fall off is pretty rapid, where after 6 meters, the Nitro Cell will do absolutely no damage to any operator. But that's enough about damage. We'll move on to other basic information you really need to know about Nitro Cells. The first most important piece is the distinct sound cue. Whenever a defender pulls out a Nitro Cell, it'll always make a very distinct rip. Kinda sounds like Velcro. Other people say that it's duct tape. I'm just going to go with Velcro. But every time a defender pulls it out, you hear that rip. This gives the attackers some time to get away from the Nitro Cell before it's actually thrown. Because if you could throw it without any warning, it would be incredibly easy to kill people and catch them off guard. Nitro Cells will also emit a somewhat loud beeping noise when they're placed, or even when they're flying. Because of this, it can be very easy to hear them if they're pre-placed over a doorway or something. So make sure not to put them in a doorway where people will hear them and just know not to push in through there. But this noise can also be used to your advantage as a defender. You can use it to scare away attackers from planting, as every time they hear the Velcro rip, they're probably going to run away. So if they try to go for a plant, pull out the Nitro Cell without any intention of actually throwing it, and watch them scatter. Or you can do what I normally do, which is I prep the Nitro Cell way beforehand. If I know for a fact that someone's going to go a specific way to either plant or push, I'll have the Nitro Cell ripped in my hand well before they actually push. And then when they're actually going in, you throw it, there's no sound cue, they don't have enough time to react, and you can kill them. Now because of everything we've talked about, it's pretty clear that Nitro Cell's main purpose is used for killing. It's considered a very, very big waste if you use a Nitro Cell on a rotation hole or just for general destruction. It used to be the only option before shotguns had great destruction, as well as before impacts got added. But now with so much other destruction in the game, do not waste a Nitro Cell on a rotate hole. Only do it if it is your absolute only option. But if not, it's a waste. But that's it for the basics. Let's move on to who has Nitro Cells. The current operators that have access to Nitro Cells are Mute, Pulse, Kapkan, Bandit, Valkyrie, Mira, Cade, Mozzie, and Goyo. And now I personally run Nitro Cells on Mute, Pulse, Kapkan, Valkyrie, Mira, Cade, Mozzie, and Goyo. So basically everyone except Bandit. And now I get asked this a lot, so I'll just answer it right here. The reason why I don't run Nitro Cell on Bandit is because Barbed Wire is generally a much more team-oriented gadget, so I'd rather help the team than have a selfish gadget like a Nitro Cell on Bandit. And then another added reason on top of that, Barbed Wire is a great way to tell if someone's pushing me when I'm Bandit tricking as Bandit, so I prefer that rather than a Nitro Cell. Now the reason why I bring Nitro Cell on all of these operators is because for the most part they're either anchors or intel-based operators. And if you're going to anchor on site or if you're going to gather intel on the enemy, Nitro Cells are the best way to kill them. When using it defensively, it's great because if they have no other option other than to push site, you put them through a tunnel and you have an explosive there. It's just free real estate. And then for intel operators, we'll talk about that in a second. First, we'll talk about one of the best combos for Nitro Cells, which is comboing with a mirror. These mirrors allow defenders to easily line up their target and throw it from enough cover that they won't really be vulnerable. If you're trying to throw it through a little hole or just peeking a doorway, it's very easy for any attacker to shoot you. Meanwhile, if you're looking behind a mirror, you can get the proper angle and try to protect yourself as much as possible while still being able to see the attacker. This way you make sure that your Nitro Cell does not miss and can be used for max efficiency. And when you have a mirror, you can make sure that they're not baiting for a Nitro Cell and fake planting. A lot of attackers will push in, start the plant with the full intention of a defender throwing a Nitro Cell, and then sprint away when they hear the Velcro rip. So if you're watching through a mirror, you can see once you rip it if they decide to stick the plant or not. And if they don't, you can kill them. And now the other fairly popular use for Nitro Cells that I mentioned earlier is traps. Many intel-based operators like Valkyrie, Mozzie, and Pulse will use their gadget to detect where the enemies are and then detonate either a pre-placed Nitro Cell or place one after they determine where someone is. For the most part, this can be used to deny plant, especially with Pulse from below. If you know exactly where someone's planting, you throw a Nitro Cell from below, kill them, and the plant is denied. As for pre-placed C4s, these are more in very specific areas. One of the most popular positions is behind the bull on Outback. Defenders will run downstairs, put a pre-placed Nitro Cell in the kitchen, and once the attackers have pushed behind it and are using the bull for cover, you detonate it. However, these traps can be very risky because if they are detected by any somewhat advanced attacking team, you've just wasted your only secondary gadget. And not to mention it can be destroyed by a lot of attacker gadgets like EMPs, IQ scanner, or even a shock drone. So because of this, it's very important to come up with your own traps and own locations because if everyone's watching these videos and knowing where they are, then you're never going to have anyone fall for it. Now I know some people will be thinking, why would you place a C4 below the floor? They'll just hear the beeping. You actually can't. As long as there's no big holes in the ground, you really won't be able to hear the beeping of the Nitro Cell at all. And even with holes in the ground, you don't hear the beeping itself. All you can hear is this weird kind of like staticky noise. It's very hard to discern though. Which makes places like Bull a very easy location to kill attackers. They can't hear the C4, and unless they're looking for it, they're not going to get it. But that's about it for Nitro Cells. They're not overly complex, for the most part, kill. I think most people can understand that. But now we'll move on to the next section, which is bulletproof cameras. Bulletproof cameras are the newest gadget to be added for the defenders, only recently added in Parabellum. This gadget can be mounted on any flat surface except for ceilings, and it has a panel of bulletproof glass on the front that prevents attackers from easily destroying it with bullets. Attackers will either need to angle themselves to see the side of the camera and shoot behind the bulletproof glass, or they'll have to use explosives or even a shock drone, which can be kind of a waste of utility. The only other option is to melee the camera, but that can be fairly risky given that most of these cameras are placed in locations that are not safe to go up and punch. For defenders, the gadget is just a stationary thermal camera. The view can't be altered at all, not like normal cameras where you can turn them around, which makes it even more important to get it in a perfect position. Unlike Valkyrie cameras where you can just throw them and then turn if you need to. These have to be in a good spot right off the bat. Now because these bulletproof cameras have thermal vision, it can be used to gather intel for when the attackers are planting inside of smoke, and can even be used to ping the attackers through the smoke. Now because intel is so valuable, each defender that brings a camera only receives one, because receiving more than one would be pretty unbalanced. So it's important to use this one camera that you get very wisely. You want it to be able to gather as much intel as possible without being in a vulnerable position. Because if you place this camera in a vulnerable position, it'll be very easy for the attackers to destroy it. Because of this, these cameras really prosper when they're placed at the end of a long hallway or room, and when the attackers only really have one way to push towards it. If you put it somewhere where attackers can easily go around and get an angle on it, it's not going to serve you much purpose. But that's essentially it for the basic information. Now, for the defenders that have access to bulletproof cameras, they are Mute, Castle, Doc, Jaeger, Frost, Caveira, Legion, and Vigil. So not a lot of operators have this gadget, which makes it the most scarce defender gadget out there. Now personally, I don't bring a bulletproof camera on any of these operators. Now don't go thinking that means that this gadget is useless or that you should never bring it. Bulletproof cameras are very useful, but they have to be used in a very communicative team environment, or on specific sites and maps. Not every site will have a good spot for a bulletproof camera, and not every team will use them effectively. So they're not a gadget that you should bring just to have them. They're a gadget you should bring when you have a plan in the works. The big thing to make sure about when bringing a bulletproof camera is that your team's not expecting you to bring something else. For a lot of operators, there's usually only one gadget that everyone should bring on them. And because of this, a lot of teams will just, without saying anything, expect you to bring that gadget. For example, Castle is always expected to bring impacts. So if you decide to swap off impacts onto a bulletproof camera, you should let your team know that to make sure that they can adjust accordingly. The last thing you want is to try to do a Castle setup and not have any impacts for rotate holes and then be locked on site. Another good use for bulletproof cameras is to essentially replace Mira if she's banned, by placing them on reinforced walls and walls that she would normally put a mirror on. This way you can basically gather intel the exact same way you would with a Mira, except for with a camera. For example, in Oregon Basement, it is incredibly common to put a mirror inside of the closet facing towards the main staircase. Now if you reinforce that wall and put a bulletproof camera on there, it can see the exact same stuff that a mirror can see, and it's not vulnerable to being shot, as the attackers won't be able to get any angle on it from the sides unless they're already on site, and they're not going to be able to push up to punch it. So it's situations like this where bulletproof cameras really prosper. When Mira is banned, it's a very good replacement, as well as when you're on specific sites. Now I've said that bulletproof cameras are very situational so many times now that I feel like it's only fair that I tell you guys on each map where I would put bulletproof cameras. Now keep in mind this is not all encompassing, and this is also not you have to do this or else you lose. These are just suggestions so that you can find some use for bulletproof cameras and maybe make them work for yourself. On Bank, it's very common to put a bulletproof camera in the garage facing towards the ramp, or in the CCTV site facing towards the server racks. When placing it in CCTV, it is incredibly important that you destroy the TVs, because if you put a bulletproof camera on that surface and the surface gets destroyed, the camera will get destroyed. For Oregon, you can put a bulletproof camera inside of the cabinet that faces towards Armory, and like I said earlier, the common mirror spots in the basement are very good spots for bulletproof cameras. In Clubhouse, there's a very long blue hall. You can put a bulletproof camera there facing towards it. In CCTV, you can put a bulletproof camera up by the monitors and it will face towards the breach. It's almost impossible for the attackers to destroy it, and can watch if they're pushing in. The same thing goes for the garage 90 corner. For Consulate, a lot of people will put a bulletproof camera in the garage next to the white van facing towards yellow stairs to watch for the default plant, as well as yellow push. And you can also put one underneath the default camera outside of CEO office. For Chalet, it's basically the same thing as Oregon. Put it where the default mirror spots are in garage. And another spot would be in the trophy room facing towards the window. And another optional one is in blue hall facing towards the staircase. For Cafe, you can put a bulletproof camera on one of the walls inside of site facing towards Cigar Shop. It'll watch the skylight as well as Cigar Shop drop. Or for the kitchen site, you can place a camera inside of the kitchen facing towards the connector room. Moving on to Coastline, you can put it on the service entrance bomb facing the doorway, which is very common where people put Maestro cameras. And you can also place them in a variety of places inside Penthouse facing towards the big window or bathroom. For Skyscraper, really one of the only good places to put one is on the outside balcony outside of Office, where people would normally run out. You put a bulletproof camera there to watch the entire balcony. For Border, you can put one on the half wall inside of Armory facing towards the normal breach wall. Or you can put one inside of Storage facing towards the window to site. For Villa, it's a little tricky, but you can put one inside of Deer or inside of Statue facing towards Master Bedroom. Or you can put one inside the cabinet right next to the main staircase facing towards 90 Hall. And then for the last map, Outback, one wall that you can put it on either side of is either the wall facing into shower or the wall facing into game room. And then you can also put it inside of Office facing towards garage, although it's not the best camera. But that's it for all my recommended locations for bulletproof cameras. I'm sure you guys can find many more if you put in the time and effort to look for them, but these are just the ones I have off the top of my head. Now we'll move on to the second last gadget, which is Barbed Wire. Barbed Wire is one of the most popular gadgets to bring on defense just for its sheer number of uses. Every operator that brings barbed wire has 2 at their disposal. This allows just 2 or 3 defenders to bring enough barbed wire to cover every single entrance into majority of the sites. You can use barbed wire at doorways, at windows, either inside or outside of doorways and windows, on stairwells, or in common entryways from breaches. There are so many different uses for barbed wire. Now you might be wondering why people bring barbed wire so much. Well, there's a few reasons. It has the following effect on attackers. It reduces their speed by 50%. It prevents attackers from sprinting unless they destroy the barbed wire, and it'll also slow down drones. And then on top of all that, barbed wire also makes a rustling noise when a player or drone is inside of the wire, regardless of whether it's an attacker or a defender. Because of this, you'll often see a lot of high-ranked defenders destroying their own barbed wire when trying to hold a specific section. They don't want the attackers to hear the rustling of the wire and know where they are, so they try to eliminate as many sound cues as possible by destroying the barbed wire. Speaking of destruction, barbed wire can be destroyed in a variety of different ways. If you decide to melee it, it will take 2 hits to destroy, and you do have to hit close to the center of the barbed wire. Other methods for destruction include using a sledgehammer, which only takes 1 hit, ash charges, Zofia impacts, maverick torches, cluster charges, or frag grenades, basically any type of explosive. And sometimes it can take multiple explosives to clear the barbed wire, as the damage done from the explosive can be relative to 1 melee hit. So it's very important to make sure that your explosives land very close to the center of the barbed wire. Otherwise, it might not get destroyed. Now, because barbed wire is so versatile, it's available on a huge variety of operators. These include Smoke, Pulse, Doc, Rook, Tachanka, Jaeger, Bandit, Echo, Mira, Ella, Maestro, Clash, Mozzie, and Warden. And then of these operators, I personally bring barbed wire on Smoke, Doc, Jaeger, Bandit, Echo, Ella, Maestro, Clash, and Warden. For the other gadgets, I've told you why, for the most part, I bring it on specific people. For barbed wire, it's mainly because just how versatile it is. You can never really have too much barbed wire. As long as one person brings impacts and one person maybe brings a Nitro Cell, the rest can all bring barbed wire if they want. All it does is slow down the attackers, and if you want to waste time, it's the perfect way to do it. But it also has a lot of advanced uses, one of which I'm fairly fond of, but don't really get away with too much, is electrifying the barbed wire. This can either be done with Cade or Bandit. Generally I use Bandit. And this strategy basically includes putting down barbed wire underneath a window or next to a drone hole or even next to a doorway and electrifying it. For the most part, a lot of attackers, when they're droning, won't notice the electrified barbed wire, and they'll just drive their drone right into it. This is especially powerful on windows, where most people will throw the drone outside the window and then have the drone jump inside. When they jump in, it's impossible for them to avoid the electrified barbed wire, and it'll immediately be destroyed. And if they're not paying attention, a lot of people won't even notice that it was electrified barbed wire that destroyed it. They'll just think it was because an attacker shot it. A very common place that I do this strategy is on the geisha window of Skyscraper. Doing this in rooms like Geisha allows you to hold it much more securely, as they're unable to drone you out until they destroy that electrified barbed wire. Or unless they go a different way. Either way, you can waste their drone economy without taking much of a hit yourself. If you're running Bandit, you lose 1 battery and 1 barbed wire, which is not a huge deal. Most people would put barbed wire under those windows anyways. So it is a strat that I highly recommend, but don't waste your batteries if you don't need to. But this is a very fun strat to run because it can really frustrate attackers as they can't get any intel. Now I should mention this because I know a lot of people might go out and just throw bandit batteries on all the barbed wires they can find. Don't do that. Make sure you use it in a very strategic way. Banditing all of the barbed wires is not going to really help much. People will just avoid it if they see it. You have to try to be sneaky with it. But we'll move on to another advanced topic, and we can discuss the positioning of barbed wire. Some people place barbed wire outside of doorways, some inside doorways, and they each serve a different purpose. For the most part, when you place barbed wire outside of a doorway, it's generally used as a sound cue. You know when the attacker is pushing there because they're going to destroy the barbed wire while they can. They can destroy it in a relatively safe spot because they're going to be behind a hard wall next to the doorway, and they're not going to have to fear being shot while they're inside barbed wire. So once you hear them meleeing, then you can tell when they're going to push there, and you can reallocate some people to watch that doorway. On top of that, it also prevents people from strafing across the door, especially in small hallways. If barbed wire is outside the doorway, they're going to have to destroy it before they strafe. And a lot of attackers really like to just strafe shoot. They'll go from one side of the doorway to the other while firing wildly and just trying to kill someone. So they won't be able to do that until they've destroyed it. Overall, positioning outside the doorway is a more aggressive strategy. It allows the defenders to play much more aggressively towards the attackers once they know where they're coming from. Now, other people will put barbed wire inside. I generally tend to be one of those people. When putting barbed wire inside of a room, it's much harder for the attackers to destroy it without making themselves exposed. And if they leave the barbed wire until the last few seconds of a round, it can incredibly hinder their ability to just push in and plant. Because if they're trying to push in through a doorway and suddenly get slowed by barbed wire, they're very easy targets to pick off. So people will either have to be a little bit risky and expose themselves just a bit to destroy the barbed wire early, or if they leave it till late and don't bother trying to destroy it, they're just going to screw themselves over. So I lean more towards placing the barbed wire inside of rooms. But regardless of which strategy you run, ultimately the goal of barbed wire is to waste time and utility for the attackers. If you accomplish either one or even both of these things, the barbed wire was well used. If the attackers have to use a bunch of explosives to destroy the barbed wire just to push in the site, you made them waste a lot of utility. If the attackers are too afraid to break the barbed wire and are very slowly pushing, you're wasting their time. Both are wins. And with barbed wire, it is very much a learning experience. Take note of where you're placing your barbed wire and how it impacts the round. If you notice that it's doing well consistently, keep putting your barbed wire there. But that's about it for barbed wire. We'll move on to the last and most recently updated gadget, Deployable Shields. So like I said, the last gadget we're going to talk about is Deployable Shields, which were very recently updated just this season in Operation Emberize. For a long time before this season, Deployable Shields were seen as basically an absolutely useless gadget, and a waste of utility. But with this new update, they're actually seen as fairly powerful and actually useful for once, and that's because of all the great changes they added to them. The basic summary of the Deployable Shield is that it's a bulletproof shield that provides cover for any defender or attacker at crouching height and below. With the new rework, it has slits of bulletproof glass that allow both the attackers and the defenders to see through. It's not one way like a mirror. And so it allows people who are using it to have some form of intel gathering. And another one of the new changes is that the shield is made wider. Before, it would barely cover you even if you were looking straight on. Now it is a little bit wider and can actually cover most of your body. This is also in part due to the other change that I haven't mentioned yet, which is that now deployable shields can attach to doorways. For a while, it would take up the majority of your prep phase just to place a shield, not even perfectly in a doorway, but just as close as you can get so it will be flush with one of the sides. Now the deployable shield will automatically latch onto the doorway and be flush on both sides, so there's no more tiny little peaks that people can use, and you don't have to worry about being shot because your left testicle is hanging out to the right. Now, like I said, since these shields are bulletproof, there aren't too many ways to destroy it. The only way to destroy them is through explosives, a sledgehammer, maverick torch, or by standing on top of it, you fatty. Now, every defender who brings a deployable shield only has one at their disposal, unless you count Goyo's gadget. And for the most part, these deployable shields are meant to be more used in a defensive/turtling type of style. But they can be used somewhat aggressively, although the method is generally less successful. These deployable shields can also be electrified just like barbed wire by both Cade and Bandit. This can prevent drones from getting over them, as it's almost impossible to jump over a shield without touching it at some point. And this will also prevent ash charges from destroying them. However, shooting an ash charge on the floor next to the shield will accomplish the exact same thing. So it doesn't really make a huge difference. Now, the defenders that have access to this new deployable shield has actually changed recently. With this season, they shuffled out a lot of operators and what gadgets they could bring. So the list is somewhat bizarre now. The defenders that have deployable shields are Smoke, Tachanka, Frost, Valkyrie, Echo, Ella, Alibi, and Warden. And personally, when playing, I only bring deployable shield on Tachanka and Frost. And these are, for the most part, obvious reasons. Tachanka, well, first off, you shouldn't be running Tachanka because he's fucking awful. But if you are running Tachanka, the shield combos well with his turret. And for Frost, it's a very good way to trap people into stepping into your Frost mats. Since the deployable shields can now be flush with a doorway, you put a frost mat behind a shield at a doorway, and they can't destroy it unless they hop over. And if they hop over, you can shoot them. Win-win. Now for the more advanced information, deployable shields are very much like bulletproof cameras, in that you really only have to bring them when you have a very specific strat in mind. It's not really something that you bring on every site just because it's a gadget that you want to bring. It's something that you have to have a plan for. Now don't get me wrong, deployable shields, especially with this new update, are very good, but they really don't do that well unless you have a plan. One very common tactic that has been used for a while is to use deployable shields in order to block firebolts through drone holes. However, this strat doesn't really work as the fire now spreads around a deployable shield, but it can buy you maybe half a second or a second of time while you get out of there. Another tactic to use deployable shields for is the same thing as bulletproof cameras. You can really use it to lock down a long corridor. Just like bulletproof cameras, it is very scary to push down a long hallway with a bulletproof shield just staring right at you, especially when you have no cover. And if a defender's playing behind it, they can easily see you looking through the little bulletproof slits. So if you really want to lock down a long hallway, consider using a deployable shield. And then another small strategy, I guess, this wouldn't really be too advanced, but something to keep in mind. You can use deployable shields to prevent attackers from just rushing right into sight. Or it can even prevent them from being aggressive later on. Jumping over a shield as an attacker puts you in such a huge, vulnerable situation. While vaulting, you don't have full range of motion to look left and right. So if a defender is sitting to the immediate left or right of a shield, it will be very hard to kill them while vaulting over the shield itself. So defenders will have a huge advantage in this. It also puts the attackers in an animation, which makes it even easier for the defenders to shoot them. And if they do bring some utility to destroy it, for the most part it's seen as worth it. The only cases where it's not is if it's a sledgehammer or a maverick torch, in which case you're trading out your deployable shield for almost zero utility on the attacker side. But if it takes up a Zofia impact, ash charge, or grenade, then that's perfect. Then you went 1 for 1 on the utility. Now besides all that, there isn't much more to be said about deployable shields. They're, just like before, a pretty straightforward gadget. You want to use them in specific situations to lock down an angle or to protect yourselves, and that's kind of it. The very last piece of advice I'll give you before we end this section is that when you're playing a deployable shield, be mindful not to stay too close to it. Because a lot of people will just either grenade the shield or impact it or ash charge it, and that will hurt you a lot if you're standing right next to the shield. A lot of defenders like to hold their distance, usually by a few meters, just to make sure that if it does explode, it doesn't hurt you too much. And also, if it does explode, you don't want to be exposed just sitting right behind it with nowhere to run then. So don't push up too much on them, but also don't stand on the other side of the room. Find the middle ground. But that's it for strategies for deployable shield. I'm sorry that I can't really give you guys too many locations or more information on them like I did with the bulletproof camera. This is a very new gadget, so full advanced strategies are still developing. However, I did want to touch on it as much as I could, just because everything has changed. And hopefully some of this information helps you guys develop your own strategies, and maybe I'll cover that in a future video. A lot of people have been giving feedback on them, and I think for the most part everyone would agree that it has had a good impact on the game. Taking a gadget that was once useless and turning it into something that's actually useful has done nothing but help. And now attackers actually have to consider what they want to do when they see a deployable shield, as opposed to before the season where they wouldn't even acknowledge it. Or even in some cases never having seen a deployable shield since no one ever brought them. But overall, good change. Now that's it for the information segment of this video. We're going to move on to the quiz portion like we always do. Quick explanation for those who haven't seen one before. Basically, I'm going to ask you a question, give you 10 seconds on the clock, and then you're going to come up with an answer. I'll then give you my answer, and if you decide that it's close enough or right on the dot, you can give yourself a point. At the end of the quiz, I'll put up a score sheet to tell you how well you did based on how many questions you got right. Now with that all said, let's get into the questions. Question 1 will be about impact grenades. How far can you throw an impact grenade before it automatically detonates? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up, and the answer is 20 meters. A lot of the times it can be hard to tell for sure whether it blew up because of distance or because something was in the way, but once a grenade has reached 20 meters, it will automatically detonate, which means that these impact grenades are not good for long range assaults as they will rarely reach their target. So keep that in mind when using them. Question 2. This one will be about Nitro Cells. Do Nitro Cells make bigger rotation holes than impact grenades? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up, and the answer is yes by a small margin. For the most part, impacts and Nitro Cells have roughly the same shape when making a hole, but Nitro Cells are just slightly larger in certain portions. As you can see in the test I did on the screen, the Nitro Cell size is almost the exact same and almost the exact pattern of the impact grenade. However, in the bottom left corner, it juts out a little more. So yes, overall Nitro Cells do make bigger holes than impacts. Still doesn't mean that you should use Nitro Cells for rotation holes though. Question 3 about bulletproof cameras. Can you place a bulletproof camera on the floor? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. And the answer is yes. But I can't stress this enough, you do not want to do this because it makes the gadget absolutely useless. You have very little vision when it's on the floor, and it's very easily destroyable. Anyone from any direction around it just has to prone and then easily shoot the side. So don't put bulletproof cameras on the floor. Question 4 about barbed wire. Does stacking barbed wire increase its effects? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up, and the answer is no. And also, just like bulletproof cameras, I can't say this enough, do not stack the barbed wire. The effects don't stack, and both barbed wires can be destroyed at the same time. If they are both on top of each other, one melee hit will hit both of them. So 2 melee hits can destroy 2 barbed wire, when normally it would take 4 individual hits. Do not stack the barbed wire. Make sure that they are perfectly spread out and that there's almost no overlap between them. And question 5 for the deployable shield. When placing a plain deployable shield, is it faster, slower, or the same speed as deploying a Goyo deployable shield? With 10 seconds on the clock, go, yo. See what I did there? Okay, go. Time's up, and the answer is no. Although it looks like it, just because the animation goes by a little bit quicker for Goyo, they actually take the same amount of time to deploy. It just really messes with you because since Goyo has to put down the shield and then put on the gas canister, it makes you feel like the shield gets placed down twice as fast, but it doesn't. And that's it for the quiz portion. Here are the test results based on how many questions you got right. Let me know in the comments down below how many questions you got right, as I'm curious to see how you guys did and if my teaching is actually good. But that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you guys for watching. Before I go, I only have one small plug to make. For those of you who have not heard, we have made a second channel called The Bag Boys. It is going to be more of a variety channel where podcasts, lifestyle videos, aka vlogs, and Lego videos are all going to be posted. There will be a link to the channel down below in the description, as well as one on the screen during the end screen. If you want to see more content from us other than just Siege, consider checking it out. And if you are interested in the LEGO content, we just uploaded a new one yesterday, so go check it out. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.